안녕하세요. 저는 제입니다. 만나서 반갑습니다. 감사합니다. 한국말 몰라요. It's too difficult. Thank you for coming. I'm very excited to be here. Also, before we start, I want to thank the translators. So let's test them. Give a round of applause to the translators. Yeah, it worked. Yay! It worked. So I love Korea. I love coming to your country because every time I come, I'm so impressed by how progressive Korea feels and by the energy here. And I love the food. Where I live in San Francisco, I can get most Korean dishes except one that I love, tteokbokki. It's very difficult to find. And funny story, my wife is a very good cook. So I asked her if she could make me tteokbokki. And I found a YouTube video of how to make tteokbokki, and I sent it to her, and I said, "Can you make tteokbokki?" And she decided that the rice cake was too difficult to make, but she could make the sauce. So she put the sauce on spaghetti noodles. And it does not taste the same. Not good. So I am pleased to be here to talk to you a little bit about a very important four-letter word. And we all know work is a four-letter word. But there is another four-letter word that we believe can be a multiplier on all the things that we do inside of our companies and with our teammates. It's not GDPR. GDPR is a lot of work. It is open and openness. But before we talk about what open means, maybe talk a little bit about why open is an imperative for companies today. The biggest reason is the pace of change. And I think in Korea, you see the pace of change all around you. A couple of examples of how the pace of change is accelerating. It's getting faster. It took 75 years for the landline telephone to reach 50 million users around the world, the first telephone, 75 years. It took airplanes 68 years to reach 50 million users. Televisions, 62 years. Automobiles, 62 years. Televisions, just 22 years. But today, disruption is the new normal. And technology disruptors and technology companies like YouTube or Facebook or Twitter can reach 50 million users in just a handful of years, maybe 2 or 3. So entire industries are being changed and disrupted by technology, from retail to transportation to healthcare. The world is changing around us more quickly than it ever has before, and it requires different ways of thinking and different ways of working. We think more open and fluid approaches to collaboration and teamwork. When we zoom out of our workplaces, of our companies, there are wonderful sources of inspiration for what openness can produce. So take something as basic and as common now as Wikipedia. Wikipedia, as a service, demonstrated what was only possible through open participation and collaboration. It created a new source of knowledge for the world that could be shared between teachers and students, between experts and beginners, between people who are very passionate about a topic and people who are just curious about a topic. And I think this example, the service, Waze, is maybe more common in the United States, but you probably have something similar in Korea where navigation and driving technology can improve based on social contribution, where the application can collect data automatically from a driver, or a driver can input manual observations to improve navigation for fellow drivers behind them. The pharmaceutical industry is also beginning to shift to be more open and collaborative between pharmaceutical companies. Eli Lilly is allowing their scientists to share drug research and data with other scientists from competing companies as part of what's called the Open Innovation Drug Discovery Program. And they're doing this because they believe, and they're proving, that they can fight critical human disease like cancer and diabetes by sharing research together to produce a cure or to produce medicine. And my last example is a bank in Australia, ANZ Bank, which is one of the oldest banks in Australia. It is a 150-year-old company with 50,000 employees. And they recognized that the way that they worked over the past 150 years must change in order for them to survive for the next 150 years. So let's hear from them.
ANZ is a proud 180-year-old organisation, and the state of banking internationally, it's going through change.
Banks have traditionally been risk-averse, slow-moving organisations.
When our CEO, Shane Elliott, took over in January of 2016, one of the first things he did was to re-establish our purpose. And our purpose at ANZ is to help shape a world where people and communities thrive.
Traditionally, our product deliveries have been, let's deliver something in a year from now, and a year later you really deliver something that's suboptimal. Bringing in Agile and integrating it with the tools really puts together quicker delivery.
A thinking that goes from top down to a bottom up, where the people who are responsible for doing the work have the knowledge to make decisions much better than being told from on high what to do.
When leadership teams say we're going on this big agile transformation, eventually at some point they're going to need some technology to supplement that change.
So using tools like Jira, Confluence, where we're not restricting access and allowing people to look at our work has been a real help for us to do things en masse together.
Knowledge becomes powerful by sharing, so that it's no longer an individual's knowledge, it's a community's knowledge.
Having this fabulous suite of tools that just enables all of that to magically happen for us is the gift that keeps on giving. I don't really understand any of how it all works, so it is just unicorn magic.
Quarter of the cash economy, we move cash around and we're doing a kick-ass job at it. Very differently to how we were doing it 6 months ago. Very differently to how we were doing it 12 weeks ago. And it is scaring the bejesus out of the team. But they're awesome at it.
I look forward to working with my team. It's a good feeling, when you're working together to solve a problem rather than working by yourself.
So that is a great story about a very old company that is reinventing how it works for the future, so it can survive as many years forward as it sees behind it. And so open systems are incredibly powerful. I think that's what you hear in the video. And we believe at Atlassian that open work can lead to better outcomes, both within our team and within our companies. But why? What do open systems give that closed systems don't give? In a closed system inside of a company, information isn't shared. It isn't accessible to people that might benefit from it. And that limits contribution. It limits participation. It can increase things like office politics or feeling excluded. And building trust inside of a closed system is possible, but it takes more time and a lot more effort. And so knowledge inside of companies that operate like this increases incrementally, very gradually. Open systems is the opposite, where information in an open culture can flow freely. And when that happens, trust builds naturally inside of that culture. The shared wisdom of all of the people in the company can participate in helping the company move forward. And the knowledge that all of us are building together can grow much faster because we're able to contribute, to learn, to have better context about what our companies are doing. But what does it mean to be open? We believe working open is a way of thinking. It's a mindset, and it is a culture. But it is also a set of practices, things that you can do and repeat. And there are three main practices that I wanted to highlight today. The first is practicing shared context, where everyone from engineers to salespeople to people in finance or legal can understand the context of the work that they're doing and what that means for their company. The second is direct feedback, often critical feedback, feedback that helps us learn from mistakes, feedback that helps us improve our contribution to the company. And the third and final practice is access to information. And this occurs when information is seen as something that should be discovered and should be shared rather than protected. And we think that this leads to better outcomes for both the company as a whole, but also for all of the people that are participating in helping a company accomplish its mission or its goals. But we wanted to know at Atlassian, is there a link between open styles of work and high-performing teams' performance? And so we conducted a research initiative to ask teams and people about the relationship between their culture and their performance. We surveyed 1,100 people. It was in the US, and they worked on teams with at least 4 other people across a wide variety of departments, You see them on the right. And the results were both supportive of what we believe and in some ways also surprising. So I'd like to share some of them here. At the highest level, what the survey demonstrated is that there is a connection between culture and performance. High-performing teams were more likely to work in cultures that had access to information and shared context and direct feedback. And they were 80% more likely to also report a higher emotional well-being, feeling happy about their jobs, their companies, their teams, their contribution. So let's dig a little deeper into the relationship between the practice and what we learn from these companies, beginning with context. How many of you have ever worked on a project where you didn't understand the big picture? You maybe knew what you were doing, but you didn't know why. Or you didn't understand how the thing that you were working on fit into something bigger for your company. And so in that situation, I've been there. You put your head down and you just focused on getting done what was assigned to you, getting done what was expected for you to complete. You check boxes, but you probably stopped investing, and you may not have cared as much about the work that you were doing. And in our research, the data showed that people don't like to feel like they're just part of a machine. They want to understand how their work contributes to the bigger goals of their company and why it's important for them to do. And so high-achieving teams reported in the survey that they have a much higher percentage of being connected to the why of what they're working on. Direct feedback. This is one of the hardest aspects of open cultures. But studies show that the diversity of opinion and diversity of ideas leads to better outcomes. And I think we all know this, but it's no fun to hear critical feedback. Most of us want positive feedback. We want to hear that everything that we've done is perfect. And when a colleague or a boss or someone on another team makes a suggestion for what we could do better, it's hard to hear. It's also hard to give because we don't want to hurt someone's feelings. And so we're polite. And we have empathy for the critical feedback we could give. But it turns out that high-performing teams are very good at giving critical feedback and good at receiving critical feedback. They have a system of constructive criticism. And giving feedback is inherently challenging, but sharing information is equally challenging. And we live in a world where information can be viewed as currency, can be viewed as powerful, because it is the most important resource sometimes in our teams or our companies. And so it's human nature maybe to protect what we're creating and to only share it in a limited way. But when we do that, we create in our companies silos and agendas and politics. And the result is that execution slows down. But the best performing teams have open systems of sharing. They demand open systems of sharing. Now, we were surprised that this number was so low. It was only 55%. But I believe this reflects how accustomed we are, how used we are to not working this way. We've grown up, companies have grown up with silos and closed systems. And opening is hard, it's difficult. But we believe that this change can be one of the biggest changes for culture and for performance. So the research overall tells us that there is a link between open cultures and team success. But it's also hard. It's hard to change. The change that ANZ Bank is going through is a big, difficult change. It requires investment and it requires work. If you want to explore more ideas about how to move towards openness, more lessons from other companies, more examples of practices beyond the three I mentioned, we've organized all of our ways of working and our learning about building an open culture on this website. You can also find the research that I shared, more of it. And on this site, there's a simple quiz that will ask you questions about how your teams work. And it will tell you on a spectrum how open you are and how open your team is compared to other teams of companies that might be your size or might be in your industry. So thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoy the rest of the day. 감사합니다.